My daughter got suspended for the best reason ever. The call came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, right in the middle of my quarterly budget review. I knew it was trouble the moment I saw Roosevelt Middle School flash across my phone screen. In 6 years of single-parenting my daughter Emma, I'd learned that schools only call during work hours when something's gone sideways. Mr. Davidson. This is Principal Martinez. I need you to come pick up Emma immediately. She's been suspended for 3 days due to a violent altercation. My stomach dropped. Emma? Violent? The kid who cried when she accidentally stepped on a spider last month. I'm sorry, what exactly happened? Your daughter punched another student in the face during lunch. We have a zero-tolerance policy for violence, and frankly, I'm shocked by her behavior. This is completely out of character. The 20-minute drive to Roosevelt felt like an hour. I kept replaying Martinez's words, trying to make sense of it. Emma had never so much as raised her voice at school. She was the kid who brought home injured birds and insisted we nurse them back to health in our garage. She tutored struggling classmates for free and spent her allowance on birthday gifts for kids whose parents couldn't afford parties. I found her sitting in the main office, clutching a bag of frozen peas against her white knuckles. Her usually perfect ponytail was disheveled, and there was a grass stain on her school uniform, but her chin was raised defiantly. When she saw me, her brown eyes, so much like her mother's, filled with tears she was clearly fighting to hold back. Dad, I can explain. Emma Davidson. Principal Martinez appeared behind me, clipboard in hand like some kind of bureaucratic weapon. 3-day suspension, effective immediately. She'll also need to write a formal apology letter to Tyler Chen and his family. Tyler Chen. I'd heard that name before. Emma had mentioned him in passing, something about him being in 8th grade, bigger than most kids his age. What exactly led to this altercation? Martinez's lips pursed into a thin line. The details don't matter, Mr. Davidson. What matters is that your daughter resorted to violence instead of seeking help from a teacher or administrator. We simply cannot tolerate students taking matters into their own hands. The details don't matter. I looked down at Emma, who was staring at her shoes. Emma, honey, what happened? I told them already, she whispered. Tyler was hurting Marcus again. He was being really mean, Dad. And Marcus couldn't defend himself, and I tried to get Mrs. Henderson's attention, but she was on her phone, and Tyler just kept, her voice cracked. That's enough, Martinez interrupted. We've already contacted Tyler's parents about his injuries. His lip is split and he may have a loose tooth. This is serious, Mr. Davidson. Something cold settled in my chest. And what about Marcus? You mentioned Tyler was hurting him. Any issues between Tyler and other students will be handled separately. Right now, we're dealing with your daughter's inexcusable behavior. Emma's head snapped up. Separately. You've been handling it separately for 3 weeks. I told Mrs. Henderson, I told Coach Roberts, I even came to the office twice. Emma. Martinez's voice was sharp. You're already in enough trouble. I placed my hand on my daughter's shoulder and felt her trembling with frustration. Something was very, very wrong with this picture, and I intended to find out exactly what. The drive home was silent for the first 10 minutes. Emma stared out the passenger window, still clutching that bag of frozen peas, while I processed what I just witnessed. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Emma, I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. She took a shaky breath. Do you remember Marcus Rivera? He was in my art class last year. I nodded. Sweet kid, maybe 10 years old, with autism and a speech impediment. Emma had brought him up several times, always fondly, usually mentioning how proud she was when he'd successfully completed a project or made a new friend. Tyler's been targeting him since the 2nd week of school. It started small, knocking Marcus's lunch tray over, accidentally bumping into him in the hallway. But it got worse. Her voice grew steadier as she talked, like she'd been waiting weeks to tell someone who would actually listen. Last Monday, Tyler and his friends cornered Marcus by the bike racks and made him eat dirt. They filmed it, Dad. They were laughing and calling him really horrible names. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. You reported this? Of course I did. I went straight to Mrs. Henderson. She said she'd look into it and that I should focus on my own business. But nothing happened. Tyler just got more careful about where he did stuff. We pulled into our driveway, but I didn't get out immediately. What happened today specifically? Emma's composure finally cracked. Tyler had Marcus pinned against the cafeteria wall. Marcus was crying and trying to say, stop, but you know how his speech gets when he's upset. Tyler was mimicking him, making these awful sounds, and his friends were recording again. Marcus had wet himself, Dad. He was so scared. I felt something dark and protective surge through my chest. And the teachers? Mrs. Henderson was literally 15 feet away, scrolling through Facebook. I ran over and begged her to help. She didn't even look up, just said, handle it yourselves, and kept typing. Emma's voice turned bitter. So I did handle it. You punched Tyler. Right in his stupid mouth. For just a second, she sounded fiercely satisfied. He let go of Marcus immediately. Started crying about his lip bleeding. Suddenly Mrs. Henderson could move just fine when it was Tyler who needed help. I turned to study my daughter's face. Any regrets? She considered this seriously. I regret that I didn't do it sooner. And I regret that Marcus had to suffer for 3 weeks because the adults who are supposed to protect him wouldn't do their jobs. She paused. But I'm not sorry I hit Tyler, if that's what you're asking. Pride and fury warred in my chest. Pride won. Good girl. Really? Her eyes widened. You're not mad. Emma, I'm proud of you for standing up for someone who couldn't defend himself. But I'm furious with that school. I unbuckled my seatbelt and turned to face her fully. Martinez acted like Tyler's split lip was the crime of the century, but didn't seem remotely concerned about systematic bullying of a disabled child. That's not just wrong, it's legally problematic. Emma looked confused. What do you mean? I smiled grimly. I mean, your old dad didn't spend 4 years in law school for nothing. Martinez wants to play games. Fine. But he picked the wrong kid's father to mess with. I opened my car door. Come on. We've got phone calls to make and documentation to gather. Are we going to sue them? Oh, sweetheart, I said, heading toward our front door. We're going to do so much more than that. The first thing I did was call Marcus Rivera's mother, Elena. I'd met her at a few school events over the years, a soft-spoken woman who worked double shifts as a nurse to support Marcus and his younger sister after her husband deployed overseas last year. Mr. Davidson. Is everything okay with Emma? Elena's voice carried that permanent note of worry I recognized from my own single-parent days. Elena, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know that whatever you tell me stays between us unless you decide otherwise. Has Marcus mentioned any problems at school? Specifically with an 8th grader named Tyler Chin? The silence that followed was answer enough. Oh God, she whispered finally. He has been telling me. But Marcus gets so upset when he talks about it that I can barely understand what he's saying. His speech therapist said the stuttering has gotten worse because of stress, but I thought it was just adjustment issues with the new school year. My heart sank. What exactly has he told you? Something about bigger kids being mean to him at lunch. He's been asking to eat in the nurse's office instead of the cafeteria. Last week he begged me not to send him to school at all, said his stomach hurt. I thought he was just being dramatic. Her voice broke slightly. I called the school counselor, Mrs. Patterson, 2 weeks ago. She said there was no record of any incidents involving Marcus. I grabbed a notepad and started writing. No record. Interesting. Elena, Emma was suspended today for defending Marcus. She says this has been going on for 3 weeks. Suspended? But Emma's such a sweet girl. She punched Tyler Chen in the mouth after he cornered Marcus in the cafeteria. After she'd already reported it multiple times to teachers who ignored her. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then, good for her. That's what I said. But here's the thing, the administration is treating Emma like the criminal while completely dismissing the bullying that caused this. I think we need to meet. Tomorrow, if you're available. I work until 7 a.m., but I can meet you after that. Mr. Davidson, I've been feeling like a terrible mother for not knowing what was really happening. You're not terrible, Elena. The school failed both our kids. But we're going to fix this. After hanging up, I called my law school roommate, Jessica Park, who specialized in education law and civil rights. She picked up on the second ring. David. Please tell me you're finally ready to join a real law firm instead of pushing numbers around in corporate finance. Jess, I need your brain for a hypothetical situation. I laid out the basic facts, the systematic bullying, the ignored reports, the suspension. Oh, this isn't hypothetical at all, she said immediately. You're describing a Section 504 violation at minimum, possibly ADA violations too. If this Marcus kid has documented disabilities and the school ignored targeted harassment, they're in serious legal trouble. Plus, retaliating against Emma for reporting could be considered whistleblower retaliation under state education codes. I felt a grim smile spread across my face. Hypothetically, what would your next steps be? Document everything. Get statements from other parents, because I guarantee Marcus isn't Tyler's only target. Request all incident reports under FOIA. Check if the school has anti-bullying policies they're not following. She paused. David, schools hate bad publicity more than lawsuits. Sometimes the threat of exposure is more effective than actual legal action. Noted. Thanks, Jess. Call me when you're ready to stop playing with spreadsheets and start practicing real law again. After I hung up, I found Emma in the kitchen, homework spread across the table like nothing had happened. Dad? Mrs. Patterson called while you were on the phone. She wants to meet with us tomorrow at 8 a.m. to discuss Emma's behavioral concerns. I checked my watch, 6:15 p.m. Perfect. Emma, how many other kids have you seen Tyler bully this year? She looked up from her math worksheet. You mean besides Marcus? At least 4 that I can think of. Why? Because we're going to find their parents tonight. The first name on Emma's list was Sarah Kim, a 6th grader who'd apparently been Tyler's target during PE class. Emma had Sarah's mom's number because they'd carpooled for a field trip last month. Mrs. Kim. This is David Davidson, Emma's father. I'm calling about a situation at Roosevelt that might involve Sarah. The response was immediate and sharp. If this is about Tyler Chen, I've been waiting 3 weeks for someone to call me back. My pen froze over the notepad. You've already reported incidents. Reported? Mr. Davidson, I've called the school 6 times. Tyler and his friends have been following Sarah home from school, throwing things at her, calling her names I won't repeat. Last Thursday, they cornered her at the bus stop and dumped her backpack in a puddle. Destroyed her science project, the one she'd spent 2 weeks working on. And the school's response? Mrs. Kim's laugh was bitter. Principal Martinez told me that kids will be kids and suggested Sarah try making friends with Tyler instead of provoking him. When I asked what Sarah had done to provoke harassment, he said her attitude might be the problem. I was writing furiously now. Mrs. Kim, would you be willing to meet with me and another parent tomorrow evening? I think we need to coordinate our response to this. Absolutely. And Mr. Davidson? Tell Emma thank you from our family. Sarah came home today talking about how brave Emma was for standing up to Tyler. It's the first time I've seen my daughter smile in weeks. The second call was to the Johnsons. Their son Kevin was a 7th grader who Emma said had been targeted in the locker rooms after gym class. Oh, thank God someone else is dealing with this, Mrs. Johnson said when I explained why I was calling. Kevin's father wanted to go to the school and confront Tyler himself, but I convinced him to follow proper channels first. Fat lot of good that did us. What did you report? Tyler's been stealing Kevin's clothes during gym, hiding them around the locker room so Kevin has to search for them half naked while everyone watches. Last week, Tyler took Kevin's inhaler and held it over his head while Kevin was having an asthma attack. Coach Roberts saw the whole thing and told Kevin to toughen up instead of helping him. My blood pressure was climbing steadily. The inhaler incident, when was this exactly? October 15th. I filed a formal complaint the next day. Martinez said there were no witnesses to corroborate Kevin's story, even though there were 12 other boys in that locker room. Are you available to meet tomorrow at 7 p.m.? I think we're going to need a unified front. By 9:30 p.m., I had statements from 5 families. The pattern was identical, Tyler Chin systematically targeting smaller, vulnerable kids while teachers and administrators either ignored reports or actively dismissed them. Every parent had been given some variation of, kids will be kids, or told their child was somehow responsible for the harassment. The final call was to Elena Rivera, to update her on what I'd learned. 5 families. Her voice was strained. David, I had no idea it was this widespread. Elena, I need to ask you something sensitive. Has Marcus ever come home with unexplained injuries? Bruises, scratches, anything like that? She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, there have been things. A scraped knee he couldn't explain. A bruise on his ribs last week. But Marcus falls down a lot because of his coordination issues, so I just assumed. Document everything you can remember. Dates, photos if you have them, anything Marcus told you even if it seemed unclear at the time. David, what are we dealing with here? I looked at my notes, pages of systematic abuse, institutional negligence, and administrative cover-ups. We're dealing with a school that's either criminally incompetent or actively protecting a bully because it's easier than doing their jobs. Either way, it ends now. What's our next move? I checked my watch, 9:47 p.m. In exactly 10 hours and 13 minutes, I'd be sitting across from Mrs. Patterson while she tried to paint my daughter as the problem. Tomorrow morning, they're going to try to gaslight us into believing Emma is the issue. But by tomorrow evening, we're going to show them exactly what the real issue is. The meeting with Mrs. Patterson was scheduled for 8 a.m. sharp, which meant I was sitting in Roosevelt Middle School's main office at 7:45, watching the counselor through her glass door as she shuffled papers with the urgency of someone hoping her problems would magically disappear. Emma sat beside me, backpack at her feet, looking more composed than any 12-year-old should have to be in this situation. I'd spent the previous evening coaching her on what to expect, but also making sure she understood that her only job was to tell the truth. Mr. Davidson. Mrs. Patterson appeared in her doorway, clipboard clutched against her chest like armor. Please, come in. Emma, you can wait. Emma stays with me, I said firmly. This concerns her directly. Patterson's smile flickered but held. Of course. Please, have a seat. Her office was a study in inspirational poster psychology, hang in there, cats, and, believe in yourself, rainbows covering every available wall space. I wondered if Marcus Rivera had sat in one of these same chairs, trying to explain his situation to someone who was already planning to dismiss him. I want to start by saying that we understand Emma is normally a wonderful student, Patterson began, consulting her notes. Which is why yesterday's incident is so concerning. We need to understand what triggered this aggressive behavior so we can develop appropriate coping strategies. I kept my expression neutral. What exactly do your incident reports show about the events leading up to Emma's response? Well, according to the supervising teacher, Emma became agitated during lunch and struck Tyler without warning. And what do the reports say about Tyler's actions immediately before Emma struck him? Patterson flipped through her papers. There's no indication that Tyler was doing anything inappropriate. Emma started to speak, but I held up a hand. Mrs. Patterson, are you telling me that your incident report doesn't mention Marcus Rivera at all? I'm not sure who that is in relation to this situation. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app, setting it on her desk. I'm recording this conversation for accuracy. Emma, please tell Mrs. Patterson what you witnessed Tyler doing to Marcus Rivera yesterday. Emma straightened in her chair. Tyler had Marcus pinned against the cafeteria wall. Marcus was crying and trying to say stop, but Tyler was mimicking his speech impediment and making fun of how he talks. Marcus had wet himself because he was so scared, and Tyler's friends were recording it on their phones. Patterson's pen hovered over her notepad. I see. And you felt that violence was the appropriate response to this alleged situation? Alleged? Emma's voice rose slightly. Mrs. Henderson was 15 feet away. I begged her to help, and she told me to handle it myself. Mrs. Henderson doesn't recall any request for assistance. I leaned forward. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want you to think carefully before answering. Are you aware of any previous reports involving Tyler Chin bullying other students? Mr. Davidson, I can't discuss other students' situations due to privacy concerns. I'm not asking about other students. I'm asking if you're aware of reports about Tyler Chen's behavior. Patterson shifted uncomfortably. There may have been some minor incidents, but boys this age often have conflicts. Define minor incidents. I really can't provide specifics without parental consent from all parties involved. I smiled coldly. Actually, you can't provide specifics because you don't have any documentation of the multiple reports that were made to this school about Tyler's systematic harassment of disabled and vulnerable students. The color drained from Patterson's face. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, Mrs. Patterson. It's a statement of fact. Last night I spoke with 5 families who have reported Tyler Chen's bullying behavior to this school over the past 6 weeks. 5 separate families, Mrs. Patterson. Want to guess how many of those reports appear in your files? She didn't answer. The answer is 0. Not one formal incident report exists despite documented phone calls, emails, and in-person meetings. Which means either your record keeping is criminally negligent, or this school is actively covering up harassment of students. Patterson stood abruptly. Mr. Davidson, I think we should continue this conversation with Principal Martinez present. Excellent idea, I said, not moving from my chair. Because at 7 p.m. tonight, I'm meeting with all 5 families to discuss filing a federal civil rights complaint. Martinez can explain to the Department of Education why his school suspends children for defending disabled students but won't document attacks against those same students. Emma looked up at me with something approaching awe. Now, I continued, let's discuss Emma's suspension. Because it's about to become a very expensive mistake. 20 minutes later, Principal Martinez swept into Patterson's office like he was arriving to put out a fire, which I suppose he was. His usually immaculate tie was slightly askew, and there was a coffee stain on his shirt sleeve that suggested this morning wasn't going according to plan. Mr. Davidson, I understand there's been some confusion about Emma's situation, he began, settling behind Patterson's desk with territorial authority. Let me be clear, we take all incidents seriously, but we cannot allow students to resort to violence regardless of the circumstances. Mr. Martinez, I said, my voice steady, I've just learned that your school has received formal complaints about Tyler Chen's behavior from 5 separate families over 6 weeks, with 0 documentation in your files. Would you like to explain that discrepancy? His jaw tightened. I'm not sure where you're getting your information, but I'm getting it directly from the parents who called you. Mrs. Kim on September 28th about harassment at the bus stop. The Johnsons on October 16th about the inhaler incident. Elena Rivera 2 weeks ago about cafeteria problems. I consulted my notes. Shall I continue? Martinez exchanged a glance with Patterson. Sometimes parents misinterpret normal childhood conflicts as bullying. We have to use professional judgment about which situations require formal documentation. Emma made a small sound of disbelief beside me. Professional judgment, I repeated slowly. Is that what you call ignoring an asthma attack? Or dismissing footage of a disabled child being forced to eat dirt? There was no footage, Martinez started, then stopped abruptly. I raised an eyebrow. Interesting. How would you know there was no footage unless you investigated the incident? But there's no record of any investigation in your files. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Martinez cleared his throat. Mr. Davidson, I think you're misunderstanding our position. We want what's best for Emma. A 3-day suspension with a formal apology allows her to learn from this mistake and move forward. Here's what's going to happen instead, I said, standing up. Emma will not be serving any suspension. She will not be writing any apology letter. And if Tyler Chen or his friends retaliate against her or Marcus Rivera in any way, this conversation will be the least of your problems. Martinez's face flushed red. Mr. Davidson, you can't dictate disciplinary policies to this school. Emma struck another student. There are consequences. The consequence is that Tyler Chen learned actions have consequences when you target vulnerable children. The consequence is that Marcus Rivera learned someone will stand up for him when adults fail. Those are consequences I can live with. I gathered my phone and notepad. Emma, we're leaving. You cannot remove her from school grounds during the suspension period, Patterson protested. Watch me. I looked directly at Martinez. I'll be back at 3 p.m. to pick Emma up from her regular classes. If she's not in those classes, if she's been removed or punished in any way, my next phone call will be to Channel 7 News. I think they'd be very interested in a story about Roosevelt Middle School protecting bullies while suspending their victims' defenders. Martinez stood as well, his face now completely red. This is not over, Mr. Davidson. You're absolutely right, I agreed. Tonight at 7 p.m., Roosevelt High School Library. 5 families, Mr. Martinez. All with documentation of your school's failures. All with children who've been failed by your administration. I smiled coldly. I suggest you bring a lawyer. As Emma and I walked toward the exit, she whispered, Dad, are we really going to be on the news? Honey, I said, pushing open the front door, before this is over, Channel 7 is going to be the least of their worries. The afternoon pickup went exactly as I predicted. Emma was sitting in her regular 6th grade English class when I arrived at 2:58 p.m., but the tension in the main office was thick enough to cut with a knife. The secretary, Mrs. Chen, and yes, I caught the irony of the shared surname, barely made eye contact as she buzzed me through to collect my daughter. How was your day, sweetheart? I asked as we walked to the car. Weird, Emma admitted. Mrs. Henderson avoided looking at me all morning, and Coach Roberts actually asked how I was doing, which never happens. But the best part was Marcus. I unlocked the car doors. What about Marcus? He came up to me after second period and gave me this. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her backpack. In careful, shaky handwriting, it read, Thank you, Emma. You are the bravest person I know. Your friend, Marcus. I felt my throat tighten. That's quite a compliment. Dad, 3 other kids came up to me today to say Tyler's been bothering them too. Kids I didn't even know about. Emma buckled her seatbelt. There's this 6th grader, Amy Chen, no relation to Tyler, and she said he's been taking her lunch money since September. And Ben Morrison from my science class said Tyler cornered him in the bathroom last week. My hand stilled on the steering wheel. 7 families. Maybe more. Did you get their contact information? Way ahead of you, Emma said, pulling out another piece of paper. Amy's mom works at the hospital with Mrs. Rivera, and Ben's dad owns that auto shop on 5th Street. Pride swelled in my chest again. Emma, you're incredible. I learned from the best, she said with a grin that reminded me so much of her mother it made my heart ache. By 4 p.m., I'd made 2 more phone calls. Amy Chen's mother, Linda, broke down crying when I explained why I was calling. I thought it was just Amy going through a phase, she sobbed. She's been so anxious about school, begging for extra lunch money, saying she kept losing it. Last week she asked if she could start packing lunches instead of buying them, which seems strange because she loves the school pizza. Linda, how much money are we talking about? $4 a day for 3 weeks. That's $60. I kept thinking she was being careless with money, so I made her do extra chores to learn responsibility. Her voice cracked. I punished her for being robbed. Ben Morrison's father, Mike, had a different reaction entirely. That little bastard cornered my son in the bathroom. His voice was dangerously quiet. Ben came home with a bloody nose last Tuesday, said he'd walked into a door. I should have known. Mike, I need you to stay calm. We're handling this the right way. The right way? Davidson, my kid's been getting shaken down for lunch money and beaten up in school bathrooms, and nobody thought to mention it to me. How is letting administrators cover this up the right way? Because, I said firmly, we're going to destroy them with documentation instead of giving them an excuse to paint us as the unreasonable ones. Tonight, 7 p.m., Roosevelt High Library. Bring any evidence you have, photos of Ben's injuries, receipts for replaced items, anything. I'll be there. And Davidson. Thank your daughter for me. Ben said Emma's been checking on him between classes since yesterday, making sure he's okay. That girl's got more backbone than the entire Roosevelt administration. By 6 p.m., I had confirmed attendance from 7 families. Elena Rivera was bringing Marcus, partly because she couldn't find childcare but mostly because she wanted him to see adults taking action on his behalf. David, I'm nervous, she admitted when she called to confirm. What if they retaliate against Marcus for this? What if things get worse? Elena, things can't get worse. Right now Marcus is being tortured daily while adults ignore it. The only direction from here is up. At 6:45, I stood outside Roosevelt High School's library, watching cars pull into the parking lot. The Johnsons arrived first, followed by the Kims, then Mike Morrison with Ben in tow. Elena Rivera pulled up in her 10-year-old Honda just as Linda Chen parked her minivan. Emma stood beside me, her chin raised in that determined way that meant she was nervous but committed. Dad, what if they don't listen to us either? I squeezed her shoulder as the families approached. Sweetheart, they're going to listen. Because this time, we're not asking. As we walked toward the library entrance, I noticed Principal Martinez's car already in the parking lot, along with 2 others I didn't recognize. He'd brought backup. Good. So had I. The Roosevelt High Library at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday felt like a courtroom, complete with opposing sides eyeing each other across the central table. Martinez had indeed brought backup, a thin woman in an expensive suit who introduced herself as District Legal Counsel Rebecca Walsh, and surprisingly, Superintendent Dr. Patricia Vance herself. I appreciate everyone coming together, Dr. Vance began, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone used to controlling rooms full of angry parents. However, I need to clarify that this is an informal discussion, not an official hearing. We're here to address some apparent miscommunications about recent incidents. Miscommunications, Mike Morrison repeated flatly. Is that what we're calling extortion now? I positioned myself at the head of the parent group, with Elena and Marcus Rivera to my right. Marcus sat quietly, occasionally stimming with a small fidget cube, but his presence was powerful, a living reminder of what this was really about. Mr. Morrison, Walsh interjected smoothly, we need to be very careful about inflammatory language. Schools deal with normal peer conflicts daily, and sometimes parents can misinterpret. Excuse me, Linda Chen interrupted, her voice shaking but determined. Are you saying I misinterpreted $60 in stolen lunch money? Because I have receipts. She slid a manila folder across the table. September 15th through October 8th. $4 a day, taken by Tyler Chen from my daughter Amy. She finally told me yesterday because she was afraid I'd be mad at her for losing more money. Walsh barely glanced at the folder. Even if that's accurate, children often have disagreements about money. Without witnesses or video evidence. There are witnesses, Ben Morrison said suddenly, his young voice cutting through the adult conversation. Everyone turned to stare at the 7th grader, who flushed red but continued speaking. Tyler's friends Jake Martinez and Connor Walsh watch him do it. They think it's funny. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Vance's eyes darted to Principal Martinez, whose face had gone pale. Did he just say Jake Martinez? Mrs. Johnson whispered to her husband. As in. Martinez cleared his throat roughly. My son Jake is not involved in any. And Connor Walsh, I said, looking directly at the district's legal counsel. Any relation, Ms. Walsh? Rebecca Walsh's professional composure cracked slightly. My nephew Connor is a good kid who wouldn't. Oh, this is rich, Mike Morrison laughed bitterly. The principal's son and the district lawyer's nephew are Tyler's wingmen, and somehow nobody in administration noticed a pattern of bullying. What are the odds? Elena Rivera had been silent throughout the exchange, but now she stood slowly, Marcus's hand in hers. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but it carried the weight of months of watching her son suffer. My Marcus came home 2 weeks ago and asked me why God made him different if it only meant people would hurt him. Her words fell into the silence like stones into still water. He's 8 years old. 8. And your good kids filmed him eating dirt while he cried. Dr. Vance finally spoke. Mrs. Rivera, I'm truly sorry that Marcus has had negative experiences. Don't. Elena's voice cracked. Don't you dare minimize this as negative experiences. Your school failed my son. Your teachers ignored him. Your administrators protected the children of their colleagues while my baby suffered. Marcus tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered something I couldn't hear. Elena nodded and looked back at the administrators. Marcus wants to know if the bad boys are going to get in trouble now that the grown-ups know. What should I tell him? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and I realized this was the moment everything would pivot. Dr. Vance, Martinez, and Walsh exchanged glances, and I could practically see them calculating political damage control versus actual accountability. Emma squeezed my hand under the table, and I squeezed back. Whatever came next, we were ready. Dr. Vance was spared from answering Marcus's heartbreaking question by the library doors opening with a sharp bang. A man in his 40s strode in, his expensive suit and confident demeanor screaming corporate attorney. Behind him walked a woman I recognized from local news, Channel 7's investigative reporter, Sarah Chen. I'm sorry I'm late, the man announced, extending his hand to me. Robert Chen, Tyler's father and senior partner at Chen, Morrison and Associates. His eyes swept the room with practiced assessment. I understand there are some serious allegations being made against my son. My blood ran cold. Chen, Morrison and Associates was one of the largest law firms in the state. This just became exponentially more complicated. Mr. Chen, Dr. Vance said carefully, this is just an informal discussion. Nothing about this is informal when you're accusing a minor of criminal behavior. Robert Chen's voice cut through the room like a blade. I've already spoken with the families Tyler allegedly victimized, and I think we'll find these claims are greatly exaggerated. Elena Rivera stared at him in disbelief. Spoken with the families? When? This afternoon. Very reasonable conversations about childhood misunderstandings. His smile was sharp. I think you'll find most of these issues can be resolved quietly, without involving media or federal agencies. Sarah Chen, the reporter, not the lawyer's family member, stepped forward with her phone recording. Mr. Chen, are you saying you contacted the families of alleged bullying victims to discuss their complaints directly? Walsh shot to her feet. There will be no media interviews during this discussion. Actually, I interrupted, standing as well. Mr. Chen just admitted to something very interesting. I looked directly at the attorney. You contacted families who made complaints about your son to convince them to stay quiet. That's witness tampering. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Davidson. From one attorney to another, I said quietly, letting that sink in, it's also accurate. You've just admitted to directly contacting complainants in a potential federal civil rights case to influence their testimony. Robert Chen's confident expression flickered. You're an attorney. Corporate law, but I still remember criminal procedure. Elena, did Mr. Chen contact you today? Elena nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. He called around 3 p.m. Said Tyler was just playing and that Marcus probably misunderstood because of his disability. He offered to pay for Marcus's therapy to help him process the situation better. Jesus Christ, Mike Morrison muttered. He tried to buy you off. I offered to help with counseling costs, Robert Chen said stiffly. There's nothing illegal about attempting to silence the parent of a disabled child. Sarah Chen's pen was moving rapidly across her notepad. Sir, can you confirm you contacted multiple families today to discuss pending complaints against your son? The room erupted. Martinez was frantically whispering to Walsh, who was typing something on her phone with increasing desperation. Dr. Vance looked like she was contemplating early retirement, and Emma was staring at the chaos with wide eyes. Through it all, Marcus Rivera sat quietly in his chair, fidgeting with his cue, probably wondering why all the grown-ups were suddenly yelling when 5 minutes ago they wouldn't listen to his mother's careful, quiet pleas for help. Enough, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. The room fell silent. Mr. Chen, you've just turned a local school disciplinary issue into a criminal matter. Congratulations. I gathered my papers and stood up. Dr. Vance, you have 48 hours to produce a comprehensive remediation plan, including Tyler's immediate suspension, mandatory counseling for all involved parties, and policy changes to prevent future incidents. Otherwise, Monday morning I'm filing complaints with the Department of Education, the State Attorney General, and apparently now the local district attorney. You can't dictate terms to the district, Walsh began. Watch me, I said, echoing my words from that morning. Elena, Mike, everyone, we're leaving. Sarah, I believe you have enough for your story. As we headed for the doors, Sarah Chen called out one last question. Mr. Davidson, what would you say to parents who feel the school system has failed their children? I paused, my hand on Emma's shoulder. I'd say it's time to stop asking permission to protect our kids. The story broke on Channel 7's morning news at exactly 6:47 a.m. Thursday, 3 minutes before my alarm was supposed to go off. My phone started buzzing with notifications while Sarah Chen's voice filled my bedroom. An investigation into Roosevelt Middle School reveals a pattern of ignored bullying complaints and alleged witness intimidation by a prominent local attorney. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The first call was from Jessica Park at 6:52 a.m. David, please tell me you saw the news, she said without preamble. Because Robert Chen is about to make your life very complicated. Good morning to you too, Jess. What do you mean? I mean Chen, Morrison and Associates just became your enemy, and they don't play fair. I've been researching since 5 a.m. They've buried 3 similar cases in the past 2 years using procedural warfare and intimidation tactics. I walked to the kitchen, where Emma was already eating cereal and watching the news coverage with fascination. What kind of intimidation? Frivolous countersuits, harassment of witnesses, strategic media campaigns to discredit complainants. David, they made a single mother lose her house fighting legal fees over a slip-and-fall case she should have won easily. The gravity of what we'd stepped into was starting to sink in. Jess, I'm not backing down. I know. That's why I'm calling. You need representation, and you need it today. I'm driving down this morning. After hanging up, I found Emma staring at me with worried eyes. Dad, are we in trouble? We're in a fight, sweetheart. But sometimes fights are necessary. I sat down across from her. Are you okay with missing school today? I have a feeling we're going to be busy. Actually, Emma said, pointing to her phone, I don't think I'm going to school today anyway. Look. She showed me her screen, dozens of texts from classmates, screenshots of social media posts, and 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. The story had exploded overnight, and Emma Davidson had become the 12-year-old who punched a bully and started a civil rights investigation. Some of the messages are really nice, Emma said carefully, but some of them are not so nice. I scrolled through her texts, my jaw tightening with each message. Mixed in with supportive notes from friends were several anonymous threats, crude insults, and one message that made my blood run cold. Your daughter should mind her own business before someone teaches her a lesson. Emma, you're not going to school until this settles down, I said, screenshotting the threatening message. And we're changing your phone number today. At 8:23 a.m., Elena Rivera called in tears. David, there are reporters at Marcus's school. They're trying to interview him during drop-off. He's so overwhelmed he won't get out of the car. Where are you now? Sitting in the Roosevelt parking lot. Marcus is having a meltdown because there are too many people and noise, and I don't know what to do. I could hear Marcus crying in the background, the high-pitched sound of a child pushed far beyond his limits. Elena, drive to our house. Emma and I will help with Marcus, and you can both stay here today. David, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. We're in this together now. At 9:15 a.m., my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mr. Davidson. This is Robert Chen. I think we got off on the wrong foot last night. Mr. Chen, you're calling my personal phone to discuss an ongoing legal matter. I hope you're recording this conversation for your own protection. There's no need for hostility. I'm calling to make you an offer that could benefit everyone involved. I motioned for Emma to grab a pen and paper. I'm listening. My firm handles a lot of corporate finance work. Someone with your background and passion for justice might find opportunities here. Starting salary would be around $200,000, plus benefits. All I'd need is a commitment that this Roosevelt situation gets resolved quietly. The offer hung in the air like poison. $200,000 was more than double my current salary, enough to send Emma to any college she wanted, enough to stop worrying about our mortgage. Mr. Chen, I said slowly, did you just offer me a job in exchange for abandoning a civil rights case involving your son? The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Finally, I offered you a job, Mr. Davidson. What you do with pending personal matters is your own business. I looked at Emma, who was watching me with absolute trust, and at Marcus Rivera, who was finally calm enough to play quietly with his fidget cube on our living room floor. Here's my counteroffer, Mr. Chen. Go to hell. I hung up and immediately called Jessica. Jess, how quickly can you get here? Because things just got a lot more interesting. By Thursday afternoon, the story had grown legs and was sprinting across social media. Jessica arrived at noon with a briefcase full of legal documents and a grim expression that told me we were in for a war. David, it's worse than I thought, she said, spreading papers across my dining room table while Elena helped Marcus with a puzzle nearby. Chen's firm filed 3 motions this morning. They're claiming defamation, harassment, and, get this, intentional infliction of emotional distress against Tyler. Against Tyler? Emma looked up from her laptop, where she'd been monitoring the online response. But he's the one who. Logic doesn't matter in legal warfare, Jessica interrupted. They're painting Tyler as the victim of a coordinated attack by vindictive parents. Look at this. She handed me a legal document thick enough to stop a bullet. The complaint painted a picture of Tyler Chen as a normal adolescent boy who'd been systematically targeted and demonized by adults seeking attention and financial gain. Emma was described as violent and unstable, while I was characterized as a failed attorney manipulating vulnerable families for personal advancement. This is insane, Elena whispered, reading over my shoulder. They're making Marcus sound like he's lying about everything. It gets worse, Jessica continued. They've hired Blackstone Media Relations, the same firm that handled the Senator Morrison scandal last year. Expect a full character assassination campaign by this weekend. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a news alert, questions raised about Roosevelt bullying claims, sources say troubled student may have fabricated incidents. Emma's face went white as she read the headline. Dad, they're calling Marcus a liar. I pulled up the article on my phone, my anger building with each paragraph. An anonymous school insider suggested Marcus had a history of attention-seeking behavior and difficulty distinguishing fantasy from reality. The piece quoted an unnamed child psychologist discussing how disabled children sometimes create elaborate scenarios to explain social difficulties. This is what they did to the Henderson family 2 years ago, Jessica said grimly. By the end, the mother was afraid to leave her house. David, they're going to come after Emma next. Let them try, I said, but my voice sounded more confident than I felt. Emma was 12 years old. She shouldn't have to deal with corporate smear campaigns and legal warfare because she defended a friend. At 2:47 p.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed Roosevelt Middle School, and my stomach dropped. Mr. Davidson. This is Dr. Patricia Vance. I'm calling to inform you that several parents have expressed safety concerns about Emma returning to school tomorrow. Given the media attention and online discussions, we think it might be best if she remained on administrative leave until things settle down. Administrative leave, I repeated slowly. Are you suspending my daughter for being the victim of a media campaign? We're protecting her, Mr. Davidson. Some of the social media posts have been quite intense. Parents are worried about disruptions to the learning environment. I put the phone on speaker so Jessica could hear. Dr. Vance, which parents specifically have expressed these concerns? I can't provide names, but multiple families have called. Let me guess, Jessica interrupted. The Martinez family. The Walsh family. Anyone else with children involved in the original bullying incidents? The silence on the other end was telling. Dr. Vance, I continued, you're retaliating against Emma for my legal actions. That's a federal civil rights violation, and it just became Exhibit A in our lawsuit. Mr. Davidson, I'm trying to help your daughter. No, you're trying to help yourself. Emma will be in her regular classes tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp. If she's not welcomed back with full privileges and protection from harassment, our next conversation will be in federal court. After hanging up, Emma looked at me with worried eyes. Dad, maybe I shouldn't go back tomorrow. What if it makes things worse for Marcus and the other kids? I knelt down beside her chair. Emma, do you remember what you told me about Tyler making Marcus eat dirt? She nodded. You said the worst part was watching adults walk by and do nothing. Right now, we're not walking by. We're not doing nothing. And neither are you. Marcus looked up from his puzzle, his young voice clear and determined. Emma, I want you to come back to school. Tyler's not scary when you're there. And in that moment, I knew we were going to see this through to the end, no matter what Robert Chen and his army of lawyers threw at us. Friday morning arrived with a knock at our door at 7:15 a.m., 45 minutes before Emma was supposed to leave for school. Through the peephole, I saw 2 uniformed police officers standing on my front porch, looking uncomfortable. Mr. Davidson. I'm Officer Martinez, no relation to the principal, and this is Officer Johnson. We need to speak with you about a complaint that was filed yesterday evening. My stomach dropped as I opened the door. What kind of complaint? Sir, Tyler Chen's family has filed a harassment report. They're claiming you've been making threatening phone calls and following Tyler to and from school. Officer Martinez consulted his notepad. There's also an allegation that Emma has been recruiting other students to gang up on Tyler during lunch periods. Emma appeared behind me in her school clothes, backpack ready. That's not true. I haven't even been at school this week. I know, sweetheart, I said, then looked back at the officers. Gentlemen, these are false allegations designed to prevent my daughter from returning to school today. We're in the middle of a legal dispute with Tyler's father. Officer Johnson, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, cleared his throat. Mr. Davidson, we have to investigate all complaints. Can you account for your whereabouts yesterday between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m.? I was here with my attorney, Jessica Park, preparing legal documents. She can verify that, along with Elena Rivera and her son Marcus, who were also here. I pulled out my phone. I can show you time-stamped photos, phone records, whatever you need. Dad, Emma said suddenly, check the Ring doorbell footage. It records everything automatically. Within 10 minutes, we'd reviewed the footage showing me never leaving the house during the alleged harassment window. The officers looked relieved to close the complaint quickly, but Officer Martinez lingered as his partner headed back to their cruiser. Mr. Davidson, off the record. My daughter goes to Roosevelt Elementary, and I've heard about the Chen kid from other parents. You're not the first family to have problems with him. He glanced around to make sure his partner was out of earshot. But that family has connections. Be careful. At 8:03 a.m., Emma and I walked through Roosevelt Middle School's front doors to find a gauntlet of news cameras and reporters clustered near the entrance. Principal Martinez was waiting in the main office with 2 security guards and a woman I didn't recognize. Mr. Davidson, this is District Security Coordinator Helen Webb, Martinez said tightly. Given yesterday's police complaint and ongoing safety concerns, Emma will need to be escorted between classes today. Escorted by whom? I asked. Security personnel will ensure she reaches each classroom safely and that other students maintain appropriate distance. Emma stared at him in disbelief. You're giving me bodyguards? For going to math class? It's for everyone's protection, Webb interjected. Some parents are concerned about potential confrontations. I was about to respond when commotion erupted in the hallway outside the office. Through the glass, I could see a crowd of students gathering around someone, voices rising in excitement. Martinez pushed past us to investigate. It's Marcus. Emma exclaimed, recognizing the small figure at the center of the group. Something's wrong. We followed Martinez into the hallway, where Marcus Rivera stood surrounded by at least 20 students, his mother Elena beside him looking overwhelmed. But Marcus wasn't having a meltdown, he was holding a poster board covered in signatures. We made a petition, announced Sarah Kim, Amy's older sister. 137 students signed it asking the school board to apologize to Emma and Marcus. And look at this, added Ben Morrison, holding up his phone. The hashtag Stand With Emma has been shared over 2,000 times since yesterday. Kids from other schools are posting their own bullying stories. Martinez's face was growing redder by the second. Students need to return to their classes immediately. This gathering is disruptive. Actually, interrupted a familiar voice, this gathering is exactly what we hope to see. I turned to find Dr. Patricia Vance approaching with 3 people I didn't recognize, 2 women in business suits and a man with a school board identification badge. Mr. Davidson, I'd like you to meet Janet Rodriguez from the State Department of Education Civil Rights Division, Catherine Lewis from the County School Board, and board member Dr. James Patterson. Dr. Vance's professional smile looked strained. They've come to conduct an immediate investigation into our handling of recent incidents. Janet Rodriguez stepped forward, her no-nonsense demeanor cutting through the crowd noise. Mr. Davidson, we received your federal complaint yesterday afternoon. Given the media attention and additional reports we've received overnight, we're conducting an emergency review. Additional reports? I asked. 17 more families contacted our office between midnight and 6 a.m. this morning, Catherine Lewis explained. It appears the Roosevelt bullying situation is significantly more widespread than initially reported. Emma squeezed my hand as Marcus walked over to us, still clutching his petition. Mr. Davidson, he said in his careful, precise way, I brought something to show the important people. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a composition notebook, its cover decorated with stickers and his name written in careful block letters. I wrote down everything Tyler did to me. Every day. Mama said it was important to remember. Janet Rodriguez knelt down to Marcus's eye level. Marcus, would you be willing to show me your notebook? It could help us understand what really happened. As Marcus nodded solemnly, I noticed Tyler Chin standing at the far end of the hallway with his father, both watching the proceedings with identical expressions of growing alarm. The confident attorney from Wednesday night's meeting looked significantly less sure of himself as he realized his son was about to face a federal investigation armed with a disabled 8-year-old's meticulous documentation of months of abuse. The war was far from over, but for the first time since this began, I felt like we might actually win. The emergency review session convened in Roosevelt's main conference room at 10:30 a.m., and within the first hour, it became clear that Tyler Chen's reign of terror extended far beyond what any of us had imagined. Janet Rodriguez had spread Marcus's composition notebook across the conference table like evidence at a crime scene, which, I was beginning to realize, it essentially was. Each page documented incidents with the methodical precision of a child who'd learned that adults needed proof to believe him. September 12, Rodriguez read aloud. Tyler pushed me down at recess. Called me the R-word. Mrs. Henderson said boys will be boys. September 18, Tyler took my lunch and threw it in the trash. I was hungry all day. Coach Robert said I need to learn to stand up for myself. September 23, Tyler and Jake and Connor cornered me by the bathrooms. They made me give them my Pokemon cards. Tyler said if I told anyone, they would hurt my little sister Rosa. Elena Rivera's hand flew to her mouth. He never told me about Rosa. David, they threatened his 4-year-old sister. Dr. Vance shifted uncomfortably in her seat. We had no reports of any threats. Because you created an environment where reporting was pointless, Catherine Lewis interrupted sharply. Mr. Rodriguez, please continue reading. The entries grew progressively worse. October 3, Tyler filming Marcus struggling to tie his shoes, posting it to social media with cruel captions. October 10, Tyler hiding Marcus's inhaler during a mild asthma attack. October 15, the dirt-eating incident that Emma had mentioned, complete with Marcus's drawing of stick figures labeled Tyler, Jake, and Connor standing over a smaller figure on the ground. Jesus, whispered Dr. James Patterson, the school board member. How many staff members witnessed these incidents and did nothing? Janet Rodriguez flipped to a page near the back of the notebook. According to Marcus's records, he or other students reported incidents to Mrs. Henderson 7 times, Coach Roberts 4 times, Mrs. Patterson twice, and Principal Martinez once directly. She looked up at Martinez, who was sweating despite the air conditioning. Yet there's not a single incident report in Tyler Chen's file. That's because we handle minor conflicts through restorative conversations rather than punitive documentation, Martinez said weakly. It's a more progressive approach. It's a cover-up, I said flatly. And it gets worse. Show them the financial records, Jess. Jessica Park opened her laptop and projected a spreadsheet onto the conference room smartboard. I've been analyzing the school's disciplinary data for the past 3 years. Want to guess how many formal incident reports involve students whose parents work in the district office, the school board, or major law firms? The number at the bottom of the screen was 0. 0 formal reports in 3 years, Jessica continued. But look at this, the screen changed to show another spreadsheet. Students from single-parent households, families receiving free lunch, or children with documented disabilities account for 67% of all disciplinary actions in the same period. Catherine Lewis leaned forward, her expression grim. You're documenting systematic discrimination. We're documenting a protection racket, I corrected. Connected families get unlimited chances while vulnerable kids get criminalized for being victims. Dr. Vance finally found her voice. That's a very serious accusation, Mr. Davidson. Our policies are applied equally. Really? Emma spoke up from her chair near the window, where she'd been quietly listening. Then why did Mrs. Henderson tell Amy Chin that her attitude problem was causing Tyler to pick on her? Why did Coach Roberts make Ben Morrison do extra laps for starting drama when he reported being shoved in the locker room? The adults turned to stare at my 12-year-old daughter, who continued with devastating calm. I've been keeping track too. Not just of what Tyler did, but of how teachers reacted every time someone tried to get help. Want to hear what they told Marcus when he reported the Pokemon card theft? Marcus nodded encouragingly at Emma, and she pulled out her own notebook. Apparently documentation ran in our family now. Mrs. Henderson said, and I quote, Marcus, other children don't want to play with you when you tattle about every little thing. Maybe if you tried being friendlier instead of running to grown-ups all the time, you'd have better luck making friends. The silence in the room was deafening. Janet Rodriguez closed Marcus's notebook carefully, treating it with the reverence it deserved. Dr. Vance, I'm placing Roosevelt Middle School under immediate federal monitoring pending a full civil rights investigation. And Mr. Davidson? She turned to me with something that might have been respect. Your daughter should consider a career in law enforcement. Her evidence collection skills are remarkable. Emma beamed with pride, and I realized that win or lose, I'd raised exactly the kind of person the world needed more of. The federal monitoring announcement should have felt like victory, but Robert Chin wasn't finished. At 2:17 p.m., just as the investigation team was wrapping up their initial interviews, he arrived at Roosevelt with what looked like a small army of suits and briefcases. Dr. Rodriguez, Chin announced, striding into the conference room without knocking, I'm here representing not just my son Tyler, but also the Martinez and Walsh families. We're filing an immediate injunction to halt this investigation pending review of procedural violations. Janet Rodriguez didn't look up from her notes. Mr. Chen, federal civil rights investigations don't get halted by local injunctions. But please, continue embarrassing yourself. Chen's confident smile faltered slightly, but he pressed on. We have evidence that Mr. Davidson has been coaching children to fabricate stories. This entire situation is a coordinated attack designed to... Dad, Emma interrupted, looking at her phone with concern, something's happening outside. Through the conference room windows, I could see a crowd gathering in the school parking lot. Not reporters this time, parents, lots of them, many holding signs and what looked like their own notebooks. Dr. Vance moved to the window, her face going pale. There must be 50 people out there. 63, actually, said a familiar voice from the doorway. Elena Rivera walked in, followed by Mike Morrison, Linda Chen, and several parents I didn't recognize. We've been making phone calls since yesterday. Mrs. Rivera, Martinez stammered, parents aren't allowed in school during. Actually, interrupted a new voice, we called them here. Janet Rodriguez gestured to a woman in her 40s who'd entered behind the parent group. This is Special Agent Patricia Gomez from the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. Agent Gomez, would you like to explain why federal law enforcement is now involved? My stomach dropped. FBI involvement meant this had escalated beyond school politics into potential criminal territory. Agent Gomez opened a tablet and began reading in a calm, professional voice. At 11:47 a.m. today, our office received a complaint alleging systematic obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law. She looked directly at Robert Chen. The complaint specifically names you, Mr. Chen, for attempting to silence victims' families through intimidation and financial coercion. That's ridiculous, Chen blustered. I was trying to resolve this quietly. By offering hush money to the mother of a disabled child, Agent Gomez continued. Mrs. Rivera recorded your phone conversation yesterday, Mr. Chen. All 47 minutes of it. Elena Rivera stepped forward, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. You told me Marcus was too damaged to be a reliable witness and that I should think carefully about dragging a mentally impaired child through legal proceedings. Then you offered me $15,000 to move Marcus to a different school. The room erupted. Jessica was frantically taking notes, Dr. Vance looked like she was planning her resignation, and Robert Chin appeared to be calculating how quickly he could reach the exit. But Emma was staring at something else entirely, her phone screen, where notifications were pouring in faster than she could read them. Dad, she said quietly, I think you need to see this. She handed me her phone, and I felt my blood turn to ice. Someone had posted Emma's home address on social media, along with photos of our house and a message that made my hands shake. Emma Davidson ruined Tyler's life. Maybe it's time someone returned the favor. Roosevelt High football parking lot, tonight at 8 p.m. Let's show this little snitch what happens to rats. Agent Gomez was reading over my shoulder. Mr. Davidson, pack a bag. Your family is going into protective custody. Now. The war had just become a siege, and Emma was in the crosshairs. The protective custody safe house was a bland suburban rental 40 minutes outside town, but by Saturday morning it had become our war room. Agent Gomez sat across from me at the kitchen table, her laptop showing surveillance footage from Roosevelt High's parking lot the night before. 17 vehicles showed up, she reported grimly. We identified 12 individuals, including Jake Martinez and Connor Walsh. They waited until nearly midnight before dispersing. Emma looked up from her cereal, remarkably calm for someone whose life had been threatened by teenagers with too much privilege and too little supervision. Did you arrest them? We're building a case. But Emma, I need you to understand, this isn't over just because we scared them off for one night. My phone buzzed with a call from Jessica. David, turn on channel 7. Now. I fumbled for the remote as Sarah Chen's face filled the screen, standing outside the Roosevelt district office with a crowd behind her that looked like half the town. This is a developing story that began with one 12-year-old girl's decision to defend a bullied classmate and has now exploded into a federal investigation exposing systematic corruption in Roosevelt school administration, Chen reported. Behind me, more than 200 parents and students have gathered demanding immediate resignations from Principal Martinez, Dr. Vance, and the entire school board. The camera panned across handmade signs reading, Fire Martinez, Protect Our Kids, and Emma Davidson is a hero. In the center of the crowd, Marcus Rivera stood on Elena's shoulders, holding a sign that made my throat tight. Thank you, Emma. You saved me. Dad, look, Emma whispered, pointing at the screen. The camera had found Tyler Chen in the crowd, not with supporters, but standing alone near the back, his face red with what looked like shame rather than anger. As we watched, he approached Marcus and Elena, said something I couldn't hear, then handed Marcus a folded piece of paper before walking away. My phone rang. Elena's voice was shaking, but with emotion rather than fear. David, you need to hear this. Tyler just apologized to Marcus. Really apologized. He said his father told him that bullying was just boys being boys and that weak kids needed to learn to be stronger. She paused. He asked Marcus to forgive him and said he wants to help make this right. What was on the paper he gave Marcus? A list of every kid he's bullied this year, with dates and witnesses. David, there are 23 names on here. 23 children. By Monday morning, the dominoes were falling faster than anyone could count. Dr. Vance resigned at 6 a.m. via email. Principal Martinez was placed on administrative leave pending criminal investigation. The entire school board called an emergency meeting to discuss leadership transitions and policy reforms. But the best news came at 7:23 a.m., when Agent Gomez called to tell us we could go home. Robert Chen has been arrested on federal charges, she explained. Witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. His law firm is in full damage control mode. They've already announced Tyler is being transferred to a private therapeutic school and that they're establishing a $500,000 anti-bullying fund for Roosevelt. Emma was quiet during the drive home, staring out the window at familiar streets that looked exactly the same despite everything that had changed. Penny for your thoughts, sweetheart, I said as we pulled into our driveway. I was just thinking about what Marcus wrote in that notebook. Every single day, he wrote down what happened to him, even when no adults would listen. She unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to face me. Dad, do you think he knew someone would eventually read it? I think Marcus is a lot braver than anyone gave him credit for. Emma smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her in days. Just like his friend who punched a bully. Just like his friend who stood up when it mattered, I corrected, pulling her into a hug. Emma, I am so proud of the person you're becoming. 2 weeks later, Roosevelt Middle School implemented the Marcus Rivera Anti-Bullying Protocol, a comprehensive system requiring immediate documentation and response to all harassment reports. Emma returned to school to find herself something of a legend, but more importantly, she returned to find Marcus eating lunch surrounded by friends who competed to sit next to the kid who'd helped expose the truth. And sometimes, late at night when Emma was doing homework and the house was quiet, I'd think about that moment in Principal Martinez's office when he'd asked what triggered Emma's aggressive behavior. The answer was simple. She'd learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to walk by and do nothing. My daughter got suspended for the best reason ever, and in the process, she learned that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always worth it.